It is the NFL Strategy Show, Week 5 edition, Monday, October 7th, 2019. Dave Lochran and Manny Laura breaking. You know what I just realized?
What's that?
I'm under M. Laura, and you're under Lofty D.
All right, I'll be you for one day. No
Would you
biggie.
look at that? You might have to be me for a
I'll
day.
be you. Doesn't matter.
Oh, I'll change it when I get a second. But I got screen share pulled up today.
Cool.
It would be better if it was on your screen, only because you're a wizard when it comes to lineup study. But we'll be able to get that done. I also have something pulled up. I'm just going to use DK Live for it to look at the top performing fantasy players from each position. It is insane. Again, I'm Dave Lochran. That's Manny Laura. Let me fix those up. But you and I discussed it yesterday. It's funny because we're on SiriusXM Fantasy on the weekends together, right? So we prep everyone for it on Saturday, and then we break it all down on Sunday. We were baffled by the results yesterday, and it's funny because after week 1, we're like, yeah, you won't see this again. And then the perfect lineup beats it by what? 100 points almost?
Almost 100. Ridiculous. Yeah, no, we scored what, 370? I think we did 290 in week 1 or week 2. And we were like, oh man, there's no way this is an outlier, guys. There's no way John Ross and someone else can go for 150 and 2 touchdowns. Won't happen again. Next thing you know, everyone has 203 touchdowns. It's just like, what the heck is going on, dude? Yeah, it was the biggest. It was probably the highest scoring week I've ever seen ever in all my seasons playing DFS NFL, right? And when that happens, and most of it is chalk too, or at least players that people were on, it makes it really tough to not only win, but have that perfect combination, right? Because you could have great combinations. I had a great combination. I scored over 300 yesterday.
I know you did.
Didn't matter. People were up there at 330. And when that's the case, I mean, it's just who has the better combination at that point. And yeah, that's what it was yesterday. And some people made, again, life-changing money. Some even at 300 were left with nothing, like me.
Yep. And that's what we're here to do. We're going to break all of it down. It's pretty incredible. I had mentioned to you yesterday that I think I had 57 or 60 teams above 200 alone.
That's crazy.
Like 20 of them above 240. I didn't hit 300 as you did, but I had a really solid core. I mean, 75% McCaffrey, 30% Fuller, 30% Michael Thomas, but it wasn't enough because I only had a couple Aaron Jones lineups. Like, you needed everything to be perfect. Absolutely perfect.
It wasn't if like you played Fournette, you loved it, but I mean, he didn't win you anything because even though he rushed for 100, he had his TD, he had whatever. Just there were guys like McCaffrey and Aaron Jones on the slate, right? And then you have guys like Tyler Boyd. Tyler Boyd went insane. He went awesome, especially in that second half. If you played Tyler Boyd, I can probably guarantee you were not in the top 1%, 2%. That's how crazy yesterday was. Like, you needed Amari, you needed Michael Thomas, you needed Will Fuller, you needed McCaffrey. And then on top of that, which is we still haven't even gotten to yet, the Eagles put up almost 40 points.
You hate that.
I can't stand that. It's like, you know how frustrating it is when a defense scores 40. So like the 6% that had that defense just have a significant edge over everyone else, right? Because if the next best defense scores, let's just even put it at 20, because that's a really good score for defenses, you're still 15 points behind. That's like a full player ahead of everyone else, right? And yeah, it sways things way too much in my opinion, but I don't know, man. So crazy, insane scores. The only person I think that put it all together ended up winning the whole thing. So congratulations to those that had great weeks. It was definitely a wild one. So many points to go around.
No question. We're going to break down the Millionaire Maker. It's actually one of your buddies, which is kind of cool to see. But let me just show you something first. I'm just pulling up my lineups from the NFL Slant, the $9, 500K, 50K to first. And if you pull up YouTube, Manny, you'll be able to see along with me.
Yeah, I'm watching. Mm-hmm.
So 279.54 was my highest score. That was good for $50, right? That was good for $50. Then if you look, I had all of these lineups above 200. But this is what's amazing. 198.62 didn't cash.
That's crazy.
Right?
I think that cashes every week ever in NFL.
You would think so. 198.62 did not cash, which
That's
is
nuts,
just
man.
insane. And I mean, as you can see here, I had 74% Christian McCaffrey. Now, probably went a little overboard on Tate. Mixon was the killer for me, though, right? Because I had 37%, but I had a lot of Fournette, Ridley. Dalton came through in the end, but not nearly enough. 28% Fuller, Michael Thomas. There were a lot of guys here that, 21% Watson. But I guess the thing is I wasn't. Oh, and 21% Eagles. Normally, I'd feel really good about those exposures. But, you needed more. Like, I needed more than... Not necessarily because I could have, had the perfect lineup with like Jones in one of them, but I didn't have a lot of Aaron Jones. And when you have that much Andy Dalton, your Tyler Boyd isn't worth as much because I think I only had like 5% Boyd without Dalton. But as you can see here, Tate didn't hurt me because as you pointed out, and we'll get to it, the guy that won the Millie Maker had James White and he only had like 13. But the amount of Joe Mixon I had, I'd say was the reason that I had a slight loss on this slate.
Yeah, so it's and looking over your exposures because I see them now, they're not even bad exposures. You'd think with even in hindsight, looking at your exposures, you're like, all right, this guy raked. Like
you would think I did okay
everything.
At least. I was minus 190 on 1350.
Yeah, so it's you go back and it's like, well, you just needed the perfect combination. I'll put it to you in this perspective, right? The highest owned quarterback was Deshaun Watson. Obviously, had the biggest game, right? And for those that did play Deshaun Watson, great. But there were so many players that did well, you didn't even need those guys. It came down to just having the perfect lineup, or as perfect as you can get it, right? The winner of the Millionaire Maker had Teddy Bridgewater, right? I scored 300 with Dak. Like, it wasn't even Matt Ryan. It wasn't even Deshaun Watson. Like, people forget, like, Dak in that game, yeah, the Cowboys lost. Everyone, I think in YouTube chat saying how bad the Cowboys suck. Dak had almost 500 yards, right? And if you paired him with Cooper and Gallup like I did, and you ran it back like Aaron Jones, I remember off air during commercials, we were like, dude, Manny, what? You have Dak and who? And I'm like, well, I paired him with Cooper, Gallup. And he's like, did you run it back with Jones? I'm like, yeah, I also have McCaffrey in that lineup. Like, oh, damn, dude, you're going to. I'm like, no, we're not even close, man. It's so crazy. Like, you needed the perfect combination. There were so many ways to get there that it just came down to who put it all together better than anyone else.
Yep. And I'm trying to pull it up now. I'm using a different browser because for some reason Cruncher on Chrome doesn't do what I need it to do. It slows down. But what I want to do is pull up what you and I do every night to close out our serious show. Right. It's the perfect lineup.
Right.
When you see this lineup, it is one of the most incredible things ever. Like, the crazy thing too is I wouldn't say that people actually nailed this, but they got way closer than you would ever expect. So here we have it. Matt Ryan was in the perfect lineup, which by the way scored 372.7 DraftKings points.
I'm not sure we see it on the screen, do we? Or is it just me?
Oh no, you're probably right. It should pop up. No, we'll get it up there.
All right, cool.
It's coming up now. It's just, of course, you're delayed a little bit watching.
Oh, there you go. Now it is. Mm-hmm.
So 372.7. Matt Ryan with 36. Christian McCaffrey with 51. Aaron Jones with 52. Amari Cooper with 43. Michael Thomas with 44. DJ Chark with 39. Fells with 16, which, by the way, if you look at tight ends, the tight ends this week, the best tight end on this slate, I'm not including Gerald Everett here, Zach Ertz with 16.7. So Darren Fells had 16, Cook had 14. All of them were fine. There were no high-performing tight ends. Will Fuller with 57 and the Eagles with 35. $50,000 salary cap was completely maxed. We said, oh, you never see stuff like this again weeks before. I don't know if you ever see something like this ever again.
I mean, this seems like you can't get a better lineup than this. I don't even know how. Like even if we had the best lineup for every single week going forward, I don't know, and add an extra player, I don't think we get there. That's how. I mean, that's almost 400. And what's even crazier is that almost seems like a doable lineup, right? I would have,
Sure.
guessed that a stack would have been in there of some sort, but even if it wasn't, like all those players were players that we all thought were in play.
Outside of Fells.
Outside of Fells, right? Outside of Fells, right? It's we all liked McCaffrey. Aaron Jones was in there. If you played Dak, you played Cooper. You had Will Fuller was, I think Deshaun Watson's probably best pairing. Like Michael Thomas, they all were plays that we thought were good this week, right? So it's not even, it was just a perfectly put lineup. They all had the best players at their, and it was perfect because it was 50,002 on DraftKings. Like, I don't know, man. That's one heck of a lineup. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, and when you bring it back like to last week, and you look at the optimal, it was 290. The best possible lineup was 82 points lower than this one. In week 3, it was 321, pretty high, no question. Week 1 was 282, and we thought that was high. So I mean, it's remarkable the type of scores you see. I think though it was week 2 where you and I couldn't believe, the Jets were in the optimal. 2 tight ends were in the optimal, and it was 321. But you come back to this one, and you're talking about 372.7 points. Outside of tight end, I mean, you'll never see it again. You had what? You had 3 players above 50.
And others hovering around 50.
Yes.
They were at 40 something. Like
Michael Thomas 44, Cooper 43. It's one of the craziest things you're ever going to see. And look, I'm sure there are a lot of people that might be new to DFS, new to football, and they look at yesterday and they say, how do I ever win when these are the scores, right? Like, people are thinking that. But you have to keep something in mind, too. Michael Thomas was chalk. Christian McCaffrey was chalk. Will Fuller was pretty chalky. Eagles, Manny, were the Eagles chalky?
I don't think they were chalky. They were about 6% owned, but people had a reason to play them, supposedly, so I guess I believe them.
Yeah. But, a lot of the big chalk went off. Like McCaffrey, Thomas, and Fuller. Fuller not uber chalk, but definitely popular enough. There was a lot of hype around them. When that 3 group of players that is popular goes off and you get away from that, it's going to feel terrible. And I wanted to mention what Ben Rasa, one of our buddies, he joins us on Sirius all the time. He does a lot of NFL and PGA work with us at Awesemo. He had said to me, we were talking after the slate ended yesterday, and maybe to encourage anyone that's pissed off about this, but he's like, look, these are not the weeks that I do well. He's like, the weeks that I do well is where the chalk does not go insanely crazy, right? On the weeks where the chalk is just decent or flops and they're super heavily owned, those are a lot of the times where some of the better players actually have their biggest weeks.
Yeah, for sure. I echo that too. I think I'm probably in the same boat as him. Every time chalk hits like this, it's because just think about it. It's literally everyone who played, even decently owned players, because they thought they were great plays, or they had some sort of FOMO. They couldn't get away from those guys, or didn't diversify enough, or had only a few lineups. They played the guys they were supposed to, and they didn't really differentiate from the field. And on weeks like this, it works, right? You just have to be the lucky one that puts it all together better than everyone else. But it's strategies like Ben's that over the course of a season get you to have those top finishes, and then end your season with a profitable mark. Like for me, I scored 303, but like that did nothing for me, right? So like, what incentive do I have to really follow the chalk all that well? And then when it does hit, it doesn't really do much for me, right? So, because like if I were to score 303 on a day where chalk didn't go ham, that's a different story, right? I'd be hiring a Brinks truck to carry all this money somewhere. Like it's not the same. Where now everyone, no matter who you played, Yeah, you're all up here. So I kept looking at my lineups and I'm like, oh yeah, 280, 260, 300, man, we're in the money. Not even close, man. And it's days like that that just remind you that, being just a little bit different can go a long way, even in weeks where, Chalk does go ham and you see everyone doing well. Like it's really all relative, man. And don't get that FOMO either. Like you saw everyone. So like for those that lost a little bit of money yesterday, it doesn't have to be a lot. Some maybe some say, well, damn, they won money. They won money. This guy won money. Wow, he's a pro. He won money. Wow, he did this. He won money. He won $1 million. Man, why didn't I play? Why didn't I play? If it's been working for you the past 4 weeks or now 5 weeks, don't really change it and understand where your process is good and when your process is going to lack a little bit. When chalk goes ham and you're a contrarian player, I mean, it's only logical that you're not going to make money. So don't try to change to adjust for what happened just now. Just let your process take course over the next few weeks, and hopefully you get the money back. But if you feel like it isn't broke, really don't try to adjust to the field. That's not the right way to do it.
No, for sure. And there were some decisions I made yesterday that I felt good about. Over the course of the week, I started finding myself more on a guy like Jared Cook than Tyler Eifert because the matchup was equally as good. And he runs more routes, plays more snaps, doesn't have Andy Dalton as his quarterback. That worked out. Felt good about that, right? Eifert was a colossal disappointment, and I still liked him based on the spot, but found myself coming around more to Cook. And throughout the week, also convinced myself, like, listen, I think this is a place where we can all make mistakes. And I almost did here by not going to as much Christian McCaffrey. I ended up just going super heavy on McCaffrey because the more I thought about it was, all right, look, Zeke's in a good spot, no doubt. Dalvin Cook's in a good spot too. And sure. I like all of these guys. So, same with Alvin Kamara. But there's just no way you can get all of them and feel that you've adequately covered your bases. So sometimes it might just be best to say, you know what, screw it. I'm going to go with the guy who's, his touch floor is like 25. Mind you, it looked like he was limping on the sidelines yesterday. He probably would have got more opportunities in that fourth quarter, but he was limping around the sidelines. I mean, sometimes you just have to make those decisions. Spots where I wish I went differently. Should I have had more than 30% Will Fuller? Probably, right? But I don't.
I mean, that's probably hindsight too, right?
That's what I mean. So it's really hard to say. Looking at exposures, I say I could have made some better decisions, but there's nothing egregious. Like if I just showed you, if I had those lineups in the 270s, 260s, 250s, 240s, I wouldn't say anything was, terribly or egregiously wrong. And the same thing on your end.
Yeah, no, same thing. I obviously had some pretty good scores. I feel like everyone had pretty good scores yesterday, right? Like, right. I feel like everyone would probably say the same thing we did. Like just when you see the top owned players at every position, it's just like, well, I mean, it just came down to who had the better combination, really. At quarterback, Deshaun Watson was the highest owned player. Deshaun Watson did very well. At the running back position, it was DJ, Zeke, and McCaffrey. If you wanted to go one more, it was Fournette. McCaffrey and Fournette are in the top 4 running backs there. In the top receivers, Tate was the value play, so he was the highest owned guy. But Michael Thomas was in there. Will Fuller was the 5th highest owned receiver, the 6th highest owned with Chris Godwin. Like, there's so many guys up there that did well. And then as far as tight end, you just needed value. I don't know. Again, we talked about Eifert at length before this slate, and it was like, well, I mean, apart from a matchup thing, like he's not someone I love playing ever. And then Austin Hooper, Jimmy Graham, like it wasn't a spot that even did well. So if you even saved a little bit of salary at tight end, I thought you were good. And then of course the Eagles being the 5th highest owned defense was, well, if you played even remotely owned players, I think you did pretty decently. And all you had to do was kind of piece it together. If you had multiple lineups, you had a shot at doing that. And yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily change anything. If you scored in the 200 plus, even the 180 plus, I'd say, man, you had pretty good lineups, man. Don't really change much. Just, it was one of those weeks where there were multiple guys having monster days, career days, and it's just who had the better combination. So don't feel down at all. And if you did lose money, I'd almost say don't change anything. Really, don't change anything. I don't think this is a week that makes you change or makes you relook at anything. Just stick with it. I think everyone did fairly well.
I think at this point, Christian McCaffrey just needs to be like auto loaded into lineups and no really second guessing that. But you know what? We've discussed it many times. I just think it's so important. Like you always say, you want guys with a floor, right? Like normally people are like, floor doesn't matter at all in tournaments. Well, it kind of does, because with a guy like McCaffrey, you know that, and people are going to reference the Tampa Bay game. All right, fine. You can reference the Tampa Bay game where he really sucked. But I mean, usually you're looking at someone in Christian McCaffrey that's just getting a ton of opportunities in both phases of the game. So if the game script flips and they're playing from behind, Christian McCaffrey is going to be the top target. You know, if it's favorable, he's going to be the guy getting all the work on the ground. Those type of guys are invaluable, Manny, when it comes to getting a good core into your lineups. And there's a good discussion happening. This is why I love YouTube chat. When I mentioned was 30% full or not enough, there's different opinions. So Timothy says, he said 30% was aggressive. And then Pat here says it wasn't aggressive. I had 65% Fuller and Watson. And then we get another one that said 30% wasn't too aggressive. It was right. Yeah, I thought it was fine. Timothy Bates is saying he doesn't have a floor. He's had one ceiling game in 5. Other time he sinks you. Buckeyes says, I like this. Taking away the results, would you have felt good going into the slate with 60% Fuller? No, I mean, honestly, I felt okay with 30 or 40. So I think that's one of the ways to break down. It's a good conversation. It's one of the ways, though, Manny, to like break down whether or not you think you had too much or not enough. And I generally like taking risks. I don't mind going overweight on a player, but you know, it's really risk tolerance. What do you feel comfortable with when you look at their floor, you look at their ceiling, and you look at what's expected from them in that game?
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So I've looked at this before, and I've looked at many different styles. As you know, on my stream, I cover not just strategy stuff and FC stuff, but I
tell people where they can find it.
Yeah, so you can twitch.tv/mlore. I do live streams every day at 12 p.m. Eastern. I'll be on there after this, just talking week 5 and stuff. But what I do also is I go over pro players and their play styles, right? And you're going to see, obviously, a bunch of play styles. I've been doing this for years, and there's videos on every sport of me covering these guys. So the answer to all of that discussion would be everyone is right. And what I mean by that is if you felt you should have had 60, great. If you felt you should have had 20, I had about 21, 22%. You had 30. Everyone's different. The fact of the matter is, it's all risk tolerance, just like you said. If you want to be extremely risky and that's your play style, then yeah, 60% would have been good for you, right? If you're like me, that you want to diversify and spread out your exposure a little more because maybe you play too much. Like, for example, and I'm transparent. I'm not a high roller or anything, but I had about 12,000 in play yesterday, right? For me, I don't want to go all in because, you know, an $8,000 hit would be brutal for me, right? Mm-hmm. So for my style of play, I like differentiating a little more. And in my case, I thought 20% Will Fuller would have been good. But if you are the type that, I don't know, you want to play $500 and you think that's a ton or at least it's change for you, it's a hobby, and you're willing to risk it to maybe get 20,000 back, then sure, 65% Will Fuller makes sense for you, right? So it really all depends on what you want to play and what you feel is your play style. Just acknowledge your play style, acknowledge that you're taking risk, acknowledge that you want to be either risk averse or you know, go all in, and then you know, make lineups accordingly. And for those that had McCaffrey 80%, great. For those that had McCaffrey like me at 50%, it's still fine because I that's what I wanted, right? And I wanted to differentiate a little more. It's all depending on your risk tolerance. And if you check out these pro players, there's some that are pretty much all in on one quarterback and one game. There are some that'll play every single quarterback in the league every week. So, I mean, it just depends on what your style of play is.
People ask me this all the time, too. And I know you've got... Dante says, quote, Manny, I'm not a high roller. I had 12,000 in play yesterday.
Do you? Okay, so
Oh,
you
dude,
guys
listen, I know,
subscribe to Awesemo.com.
but
Hello.
to a lot of people, that's a good amount of
the
money.
heck?
And that's a good amount of action.
Okay, so
do you
want me to give you numbers on? Do you want me to give you numbers on Alex? I don't think you want that.
Oh, dude, I know. It's insane. It's absurd for sure. But it's all relative, right?
Right. It's all relative. It's all relative. Correct. It's all relative.
So the question was basically all the time. I know you've gotten this a lot. I get it in basketball all the time because there are times in basketball where I literally go 90 to 100% on a player. It's rare, but I will do it once in a while. And once NBA season starts and we're doing the strategy shows, we can get into that. But I have more risk tolerance when it comes to like a value guy that's starting at point. You'll understand. A value guy at minimum salary that's starting at point guard and there's no depth at the position, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that's different than a receiver who's relying on the quarterback to get him the ball. So Timothy says Alex is what, 50K on DK? Dude.
You have no idea where you're subscribed to, dude.
Add a 0?
Yeah.
Oh man. No, but with football, you get questions like, "Hey Dave, hey Laffy, hey Manny, how many guys would you feel comfortable going like above 50%?" And it's definitely slate specific. There's no question. But if you had to give kind of a broad umbrella type answer, what would your answer be on like how many, what makes you decide for 1 week maybe to go with 3 guys above 50% exposure?
It's again, it just comes down to my risk tolerance and maybe how many plays are at the position, right? So in the case of McCaffrey yesterday, it was how many guys can you actually use that are great for roster construction, that are actually viable for the slate. For me, there was McCaffrey, Fournette, and I can actually take a look at this because I still have it here. It was McCaffrey, Fournette, Aaron Jones, and then a combination of Montgomery and Mixon for me. I thought those guys, price, value, and then roster construction, depending on who you were stacking, all made sense. That way, if I have McCaffrey significantly above everyone else, I can play him at 50 or 60. That makes sense. But if there's, say, I don't know, all of a sudden 8 guys that all are priced really well in good spots that fit the roster construction and help me get the upside I want in tournaments, then all of a sudden I can't play 50 or 60% McCaffrey. I have to go to 30 to 40% because I have 3 or 4 more options that are all viable, right? So a few things. It's how many are viable at the position given roster construction. And then, again, going back to risk tolerance, how much do you want to risk? And what I mean by risk is because a lot of people say risk and feel like, oh, how much money you put on a guy or how much money. It's how much, kind of how all in do you go on someone. That's what I mean by risk, right? So the if you play someone 60, 70%, that's very risky because if he does well, great, you win a lot of money. If he does poorly, and he doesn't even have to do poorly because there is a middle point, right? He can have, I don't know, 20 points instead of 50 like he did yesterday. He could have 25 points instead of 45, right? And 25 is good, but for the highest price running back, there are some value guys that are obviously going to get their point per dollar, and maybe a receiver gets way more than 25. So it's all about risk tolerance and then how many viable players given roster construction are at the position for me.
All right. Wonderful explanation. By the way, the NFL Strategy Show is sponsored by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports. They keep rolling out monster contests, and we have very easy ways for you to get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points. So it's very easy to do. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, get up to $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points by signing up through us, with us at awesemo.com. Our trusty social media guy, Brett, should throw a link in here right now. But if you are looking for another way to do it, our guy EMAC, good old, your old pal EMAC, is writing a lot of articles over at awesemo.com. Many of them are free as well. So when you look at these articles, the free ones, generally the Yahoo link is right there at the top of them. You click on that and you can sign up, get your $30 in Yahoo Sports rewards points. Pretty sweet, man. It gets you off on the right foot. injects a little bit extra into that bankroll, and those Yahoo Sports Rewards points can be used the same as cash on the site. So it's a wonderful thing. And let's see. Okay. So you can find it. He just actually DM'd me. So you can find the Yahoo deposit bonus links and the promo code in the NFL primetime game. So he'll have one up, probably already does, for tonight's Monday Night Football. He does a great job on those for Thursday night, Sunday night, Monday night, and the Yahoo NFL Baller specific article that was posted Friday morning. So really just go to any of the free NFL articles for the primetime games and you'll see it, or you can click it right there in the YouTube chat. Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, sponsor of the NFL Strategy Show. Manny, looking at the Yahoo perfect lineup, and then we're going to get to the Millie Maker. Deshaun Watson, Christian McCaffrey, Aaron Jones, Michael Thomas, DJ Shark, Will Fuller, Darren Fells, Josh Jacobs, and the Philadelphia Eagles. So I believe the only difference here is what? Deshaun Watson over Matt Ryan, and who else was it? Who else? Jacobs over who, though?
I think it was
Amari
Cooper
over Amari. Yeah. So not really that different. I don't think you would say anything really stands out to you here.
No. Apart from it's just a salary thing, right? It's exactly what we talked about earlier. It's who can fit into the salary and have the best combination, because all of those guys did well. They were obviously all in play, and it's just on Yahoo you couldn't fit an extra Amari, right? And instead you could fit Josh Jacobs because of salary constraints. But great lineup too, man. That one a little more traditional because it did have the stack with Watson to Fuller, and that's something that a lot of people ran. You saw it at the top of pretty much every single tournament yesterday. McCaffrey chalk, Michael Thomas chalk, and Aaron Jones I thought was a pretty nice play yesterday given the ownership and projection. Yeah, I absolutely love it, man. It's the perfect, I'd say the perfect combination. Yesterday we saw, I think, a lot of, and I want to even say perfect. I saw a lot of perfect lineups yesterday, man. And for DFS purposes, that's as perfect as you can get, right? Like, you're obviously not going to get the optimal lineup. That I think that's almost impossible. But if you can come really, really close, that's really impressive, man. And a lot of people did yesterday.
No question. Let's turn the page and go to the Czech. 182. He won the Millie, and he came in 4th and 18th.
Yep. I think he lost second place yesterday at the last minute or so of that game. That's crazy.
What's an extra 100,000, right?
I mean, you're a millionaire at that point, whatever, right?
You want to take a look at how he did it?
Yeah, let's do it. I'm down.
All right, so I got it pulled up. Why don't you go ahead and go over it, and I'll follow along. You are the lineup study guru. Yeah,
for sure. This one was a bit I'd say surprising, only because it was Teddy Bridgewater, right? And if you saw the top 4 lineups, they all had
47% Bridgewater, by the way.
That's insane. That's so crazy. So for me, that's actually pretty impressive, man. The Bridgewater play in general was impressive. To then go almost 50% of your 55 entries on Bridgewater, man, that's what you call stones, man. That's what you call stones.
He had 96% Michael Thomas.
Yep. I mean, okay, so I usually coin this one as the time machine, right? So I spoke to him yesterday after the Millie, and he goes, man, why didn't you tell me I was winning? Why didn't you? I'm like, dude, you don't want to know. I guess you don't know what happened to me. I'm not about to start crowning millionaire champions.
People crown you, and then the worst possible thing in the world.
Yeah, no, thank you. I'm good, man. So I saw him, and we kind of scrolled all the way down to see who can catch him. It looked like the biggest lock even before that last game started. Aaron Jones had those 2 quick touchdowns, and I'm like, all right, well, it's impossible for someone to catch him at this point. Yeah, he had McCaffrey 90%. His second highest owned running back was Fournette, who did well. Then he had James White, which was in the millionaire lineup. And then he also had a ton of Aaron Jones at 25%, right? He had Chris Godwin, 4th, Tate, Fuller, Thomas. Like, he was on the money with pretty much every pick he made yesterday. And then, of course, that he had 2 Eagles lineups. They just so happened to be the ones up there, right? So, I mean, it was just a dude, he was on fire yesterday, man. He had the perfect combination, I feel like. You had the stack. We always talk about stacking, obviously, but Bridgewater to Michael Thomas was in there. He had I don't know, just every great combination. He had a 3-man stack actually. So he played Cook, your boy Cook, as a tight end. He didn't fall for the Kamara trap, which I thought was pretty good. Yeah, man, it was just an exceptional lineup. Very well done.
No question. So I had 60 players in my player pool. This was in the slant. I didn't do the millie. Well, I had a couple, but max the $9 slant with a 60 person pool. I think that's reasonable. Sometimes I'll go a little bit more than that. I usually don't have much less. What do you usually find your player pool coming in at between what and what?
So yesterday, because of defense, because I spread my defense as much as possible, I usually reach up to 80 to 90 players.
Okay.
If you remove defense, I am somewhere around 70-ish or so.
Okay.
60 to 70.
Yeah, I'm usually anywhere between like 60 and 80, depending on the slate. There were a few guys I really liked, though, and that kind of narrowed it down. But look at this. He had 1% Boyd. He had 1.8% Cooper. He had very low exposure to some of the guys that had huge gains, but it didn't matter because 96% Michael Thomas. Now, it looks like he didn't max it either. What did he play, 55
no, he had 55
lineups?
entries.
What?
55 entries. He didn't max it.
Did he hand build this? Someone in YouTube chat said he did.
And no, he does not hand build.
Okay.
I don't think
I
so,
wouldn't
no.
have assumed that, but you never know.
I mean, if you hand build 55 lineups, that's impressive.
Yo, Ben Rossa, man. Ben Rossa is the king
in
at doing
2019, how you're still doing that? Number one, I question the person, but yeah, either way, that's pretty impressive.
Christian McCaffrey, 91%. Darren Waller, 75%. And you know what's crazy here? I was worried about this matchup. I was definitely worried about it because the Chicago Bears defense is insane. I ended up having 27% Waller, and I was even a little bit concerned about that.
Right.
15% Jared Cook, 36% Ertz. Ertz was okay, but it didn't matter because he was just okay, and he was more expensive than the other guys. But looking at this, looking at the check, 75% Waller, and Waller was very mediocre in this game.
Yeah, he didn't do much at all, right?
Right. What else? 53% Fuller, 47% Bridgewater, 42% Tate, and I'm fine with that much Tate, okay? Because It was Arizona. It's a bad defense, and it's also a guy that's dirt cheap as a number 2 receiver on the Bengals. So that touchdown certainly helped. But Leonard Fournette, 40%, James White, 38%. I guess I wouldn't even say there's anything that stands out as, I don't like that. Aaron Jones, 25%. Keenan Allen, though, was a huge disappointment in this game. He had 22% of him, but managed to get him out of any of those good lineups. What do you make of all of his exposures here? Anything stand out to you as, like, you usually would never go 96 and 91, right? Just the way you play.
I would never. That's just way too risky for me. It opens you up to having those days where you zero out, right? And the way week 2 and week 3 played out for me, where I went a little more risky than I usually do, it didn't turn out well, and I'm not sure I want to continue doing that, right? So for me, it's never a night, because your slate just really relies on one person at that point, or in this case, 2 people, right? They happen to do well, and I think how people analyze this is, well, he took a stand and he almost locked 2 players, Thomas and McCaffrey. You know what? Next week, I'm going to lock 2 players. What ends up happening is you hear so much information, you read so many articles, so many shows, you end up locking 2 guys like Auden Tate and James White or something, and the results are nowhere near the same, right? It could also happen where Michael Thomas and Christian McCaffrey can have pretty pedestrian games, right? Like, and pedestrian is relative to where Michael Thomas doesn't have to go for a bajillion yards and a touchdown, and McCaffrey doesn't have to have a 200-yard from scrimmage game. They could have a regular game where he gets, 25 fantasy points for McCaffrey and say 19 or 21 for Michael Thomas, and all of a sudden 96 and 90% look like they're capping your upside to an extent, right? So for me, I don't really want to ever go ham on guys like that, but when it does happen and it hits, that must be the best feeling, man, because If I knew I had 96% of Michael Thomas with that game and then another 90 of McCaffrey, I'd go ballistic. I don't know what I'd do. I'd go insane.
Yeah, I agree. We're continuing to recap here on the NFL Strategy Show. And hey, if you enjoy the show, you want to see more, you want to help support us, hit that thumbs up, like the video. It really does help us out. It helps us, continue to keep providing free content here at youtube.com/awesemo. So much appreciated to all of you who help support us here. Subscribe and hit the notification bell as well. Here's a good question, Manny. No bones about it says, Manny and Dave, how do you go about eliminating players you have no interest in? I generally always want to run crunches first to see what I get. And then see where I can make adjustments, but I don't want to tinker with it too much because generally that'll get you into trouble. I don't remove guys from the player pool. I just make adjustments elsewhere, and if you have an ownership cap too, it'll make it so you're not going to end up with that many of them. But there are many of ways to go about it. You could eliminate them from the player pool, Manny, or you could honestly just, if you really hate them, if you can just adjust their projection to what you think is reasonable instead of eliminating them, because eliminating them can get you into some trouble.
Eliminating can get you into trouble, I think, if you are very picky with your player pool, right? But I can give you some tips because I do eliminate players and I do so I kind of shrink my player pool, right? I have this thing where I say just play good players. I feel like it's what I preach and tell everyone. It's when you turn on a game, make sure you have the main people from the game, right? I don't want to turn on a Dallas game and start sweating Devin Smith catches because you're going to go insane every time you see an Amari Cooper, a Gallup, or a Zeke touch, right? You're going to go nuts. And that's the worst feeling in fantasy. So I'd say play good players, number one. And if you wanted to eliminate players, I actually teach how to do this. It's go to the variable, because what happens if you use an optimizer, right? If you use FC, you can still get, like if you have a basic rule of stacking a quarterback with your receiver and say, I don't know, you stack Deshaun Watson and I don't know, when you see your Deshaun Watson lineup, it comes out with Kiki QT instead of Will Fuller or DeAndre Hopkins, right? And it's fine because even if you have Kiki QT at, I don't know, a 10 projection or a 9 projection or whatever nonsense you have him at, he's minimum salary and he fits in your stack, and then the optimizer can still play all the best players around him to give you a highly projected lineup. Where in my opinion, that's probably a bad lineup you don't want to play. So guys like that, I'll set some sort of threshold, whether that's some sort of a floor threshold or a projection threshold, and kind of just take everyone out under that. Guys that I really don't want to play. That way I can avoid those lineups and instead get only my Watson to Fuller or Watson to Hopkins stacks that I truly do want, instead of trying to hit home runs with QT and then Ted Ginn and guys like this that you probably really shouldn't be playing. If you play those guys over the course of a season, you're going to lose a lot of lineups trying to hit that home run, to the point that when you finally do, if it's not winning a big tournament, I don't know if you recuperate all the losses. So,
okay. Yeah. Now, let's say you talked about an Alvin Kamara trap yesterday. You're like, oh, he didn't fall into that trap. You wouldn't eliminate Kamara from your player.
No way. Okay,
no, so I want people to listening. I just don't want them to get confused by this. Like, there are certain players that aren't good players, but just because you might not like a Ezekiel Elliott or Alvin Kamara, you never eliminate them from your player pool.
No, never. Those guys are always going to. Sure, those guys are always going to be in your player pool. So making some Teddy stacks yesterday, I didn't end up playing them, but it was really, even if you were running back Saints, it was really tough to put in Kamara because the price was prohibitive, right? And you still had guys like Zeke and McCaffrey and all these high-priced guys on the slate that were in really good spots that if you were going to fade all of them for Kamara and then on top of that use Kamara in a stack, it was going to put you in a really big hole projection-wise and then roster construction-wise, where you were going to be forced to not only play the chalk value, but play probably some value you were uncomfortable with. And that's something it was just really hard to do, right? If you were to make both style of lineups, right, using Michael Thomas as the pairing and then Alvin Kamara as the pairing, you'll see that the difference in projected points was significant. And for me, it was just a tough, trigger to pull. Yeah, for the contrarian guys that wanted to do it, sure, you could have definitely gotten there. But the price difference on Michael Thomas was just I don't know. I think way too much to pass that up, and obviously he ended up having a good game.
I hear you. All right, let's take a quick look at just some of the by position fantasy producers yesterday. So Deshaun at quarterback here, if you want to follow along, we've got the screen share working. Deshaun Watson 44.7, Matt Ryan 35.9, Bridgewater 31.2, Prescott 29.2, and you said your best lineup had Dak Prescott in it. Tom Brady 27.9.2, Gardner Minshew 27.16, Kyler Murray. I mean, just monster performances across the board, Manny. The biggest disappointments, Phillip Rivers had one of the worst games you'll ever see. Mason Rudolph took that brutal hit. I mean, just a gruesome hit. Kyle Allen struggled. Carson Wentz didn't need to do anything, and that was my concern about this going into it. But yeah, it was really stacking the Houston-Atlanta game was huge. Matt Ryan and Watson both finished with top numbers, but you really would have had to have run Atlanta stacks back with Fuller, or Houston stacks back with probably Ridley, maybe Sanu, but I'd say probably Ridley. And then with Teddy Bridgewater, that stack too. The thing though is it was Bridgewater. Let me go back to this Millionaire, Manny. He had Bridgewater, okay, he had Jared Cook.
Cook.
So it was it was a 4-player total. It was a 4-player stack, including Godwin, right? Bridgewater, Thomas, Cook, and Chris Godwin run it back. Okay, so a pretty standard stack there. And then look, Aaron Jones, 52, McCaffrey, 50. Jacobs was one of the biggest surprises, right? Because, like I said, I was worried about Waller, but I didn't think that they would drop 24 points or whatever it was, and Jacobs would have his best game as a pro.
Yeah, no one thought they were going to win, period.
Right.
No one even had them coming close, right? Not against that defense, at least. And then you talk about 100-yard game for Jacobs, then you're really getting into territory where I think you should quit DFS. Like, all right, so don't bother, dude. That's not happening. And it did happen. It's the variance in NFL, right? It can happen on any given week. And when that's the case, I don't know. You just take it for what it's worth. I didn't think he was a good play by any means, but he ended up getting there. And listen, it happens. It happens. A 4 or 5, and if you had him in your lineup, I mean, you couldn't really get better than a $4,500 guy putting up 30-plus fantasy points. That's insane. So great kudos to you if you played it, or to anyone who played it, but that was really tough to get there, in my opinion.
You know, it's crazy. If say Christian McCaffrey was on the 4 p.m. game,
Sure.
And Dalvin Cook was a 1 p.m. game, and he finished with 29.8, he finishes with 30 fantasy points, you're like, oh, dude, I feel great about that. Now I'm not going to get killed by that McCaffrey fade, and then McCaffrey goes for 51. Like, it's crazy, man.
Yeah, the worst. What's crazy? Like, I still think Dalvin has looked like the best running back so far this season. And he had another monster week. You just can't see it because Aaron Jones and McCaffrey happened, right? So,
right.
I mean, if they didn't have those monster games, we'd be talking about the ridiculous pace that Dalvin Cook is on. And it's just like, how on earth does anyone even? It doesn't matter the matchup at this point. Obviously he had a great matchup, but it doesn't matter. He did it against tough teams last week, right? Like, he's so good right now. And if he gets involved in the passing game like he did yesterday, man, I don't know if they're McCaffrey is the best fantasy option right now, but man, Dalvin Cook is pretty darn good, dude.
Zeke and Kamara both disappointing. We saw Jordan Howard and Miles Sanders just crushed that Green Bay run defense. It wasn't there for Elliott. They had to lean on Dak Prescott yesterday. Pretty surprising to see the underwhelming performance from Zeke. And like I said earlier, at this point, Zeke's going to have some big games. Kamara's going to have some big games, but it seems like McCaffrey, just every single week, you know what you're getting from this guy, at least in terms of a floor from his touches. And you just kind of have to roll with it. What about wide receiver, Manny? Fuller, 57, Thomas, 44. I won't go over all of them again, but looking at this list, there were 7 wide receivers above 30. And then God, it's insane, some of these numbers that we saw yesterday. Like, Juju Smith-Schuster had a decent game at 19.5. I liked Schuster. I felt good when he scored. And I'm like, well, that doesn't mean a damn thing. A lot of these guys were pretty good. Calvin Ridley, 19.8. Gallup, 27. Edelman, 28. But then in the winning lineups, you're seeing 44 and 56 and 43 and 39 and 35. It's insane.
Can we talk about how, and we talk about these two guys every week because they're superstars and they still do nothing, right? Houston just put up a bajillion points, right? Monster day from Watson, monster day from everyone except DeAndre Hopkins.
I know.
And it's going to continue happening. I was watching the game. Fuller could have gone, if the game kept going more quarters, he would have continued for 600 yards at that point. It was a double team, again, every single possession on DeAndre Hopkins. It's unreal. Like, it's almost, what do you do at this point, right? What do you do? And we're so we play in the SiriusXM host league together. I believe we have DeAndre in that league.
We do.
That's frustrating.
And
dude.
Juju, who lost Ben, which really sucks.
And Juju, who lost Ben. It's frustrating, man, because it's not even a DeAndre Hopkins thing. He's done nothing wrong. It's just teams are willing to just kind of suicide guard him, where we'll just put two guys on him. I don't care. Your O-line is pretty bad, so we'll probably get to Watson beforehand. And if it's not Fuller QT beating us, then cool. All right, good. We're good. Fuller had a monster game yesterday, but it's a double team every possession. And then on the other side, or the other team, Atlanta, Julio Jones is the same thing, dude. It's the same thing. Remember, we talked about it last week. Listen, I'm going to double Julio, and I'm going to let you beat me with Sanu, Hooper, and Ridley all day. Let them all get – I mean, that's fine. I can care less. As long as Julio's not going for 203 TDs, we're good. And I think teams are starting to adopt that against these two guys, and another 3-catch day for Julio. And it's frustrating because I have so much Hopkins everywhere, and every time I turn on the game, I just look at him only, and it's like, well, there's a double team again, and it's just, you can't do nothing.
7 receptions, 88 scoreless yards on 8 targets. That is useless in today's NFL, especially, dude. Not only useless at his price, but a 5K receiver on most weeks that does that isn't giving you what you need.
Yeah, it's a double team too. So like, okay, so let's say going with the next week and the week after and the week after. What do we do with guys like that? Because I'm trying to project them, and I can't see Julio, I can't see Hopkins and project them for like 14 fantasy points. Yeah, I can't do that, right? They're too good of players to do that. But I'm starting to think I might have to. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. I might have to do this. It's not even because their talent has gone down. They're not any worse of a receiver than they were in prior years. Just teams, I guess, acknowledge how good they are. They have really no supporting cast, and they're just, all right, we'll go all in guarding Julio and DeAndre. You guys do whatever else you want to do. You don't have good enough players to beat us.
So
type of thing.
Mike Campbell in YouTube chat says, do we fade Hopkins now on DK? I think we'll throw the same question in there for Julio. And Skylar Carnes just said what you've been saying for weeks now. He said, exactly, what do you do? These teams are double teaming the stud receivers, eliminating the main weapon to make you beat them with other players. Dude, it's like the Greg Popovich, Bill Belichick method, right?
Of course. And it's so evident because they don't even hide it. They don't disguise this. They don't do nothing. They just line up 2 guys on Hopkins every single down.
And let's not get ahead of our skis. Let's not pretend that every week that Hopkins has been bad, Will Fuller's gone off, because he hasn't.
No, he hasn't. They just lose.
Right. They just lose. So the serious question, though, what do you do now with Julio Jones, who's 8K this week against the Cardinals? What do you do? And normally people might even be saying, why are you even asking this question, Laffy? Well, I'm asking it because we've seen what's happening, and teams don't mind selling out to stop these guys. Look, they are good enough. They are two preeminent receivers in this league. They are going to have these games where they erupt. It doesn't matter, double cover. They are going to have huge games, for sure. And not every defense is going to do this. But how do you evaluate them on a weekly basis now after seeing what we've seen and knowing that, for example, Matt Ryan has Austin Hooper, who he's targeted 9, 6, 7, 11, and 9 times. He has Mohamed Sanu, who he's targeted 5, 12, 6, 7, and 6. And he has Calvin Ridley, who will disappear at times. They all will, but has 9, 6, only 1 against Indy, and then 10 against Philly, 6 against Minnesota. They have other options on these teams. We saw Deshaun Watson go to Darren Fells for 2 touchdowns yesterday. What are you doing? We'll close out the show with this.
Yeah, it's and I'll leave it with this. It's the same. It's been the same team for Atlanta for a couple of years now. It's been Hooper, it's been Sanu, it's been Julio, right? Calvin Ridley came last year or the year before, whenever. But it's been the same team. I have never projected Hooper in the 12, 13, 14, 15 point range ever on this team, right? He's never been at that projection for me. Sanu has never been at 12, 13, 14, 15 for me either. And this week, when I was projecting everyone and I saw what I was doing with Hooper, I'm like, I cannot believe I'm projecting him for 13 or 14 fantasy points.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he's just never been this guy. And it's, what am I doing with Julio? Where's Julio in all of this? Because I keep seeing all the Sanu, all the Ridley, all the Hooper, and I just kept looking at my line and I'm like, where is the Julio? Is Julio injured? Like, I don't know. What is this? All this Fuller talk. Like, am I crazy? Do they still have DeAndre Hopkins? It's just, they're just non-existent almost. And I think the systems are starting to see this now. We have a 5-week sample where it's not these monster Julio games. Yeah, he's had decent games, so has DeAndre, but the consistency definitely isn't there. And if that's the case, yeah, you have to bump up Hooper a little bit. You have to bump up Sanu a little bit. Those aren't the guys. That isn't what you want to hear, right? It isn't the guys you want to play. You want to have the monster Julio games, but listen, we have no control over other teams' defense. And if they're going to continue doubling, I have to adjust, and if not, I'm going to keep losing money, and I don't want to bleed anymore, right?
Right, and adjusting is different than being like, I'm not playing him anymore.
Right. So it's not like the fade, like you said earlier, right? I'm not going to completely not play someone, right?
No, but you know what? Here's the way I think to put it, because I'm looking at in chat, and if people, Robert says, if people are getting off Julio, I'm going to take out a reverse mortgage on my house. Always play Julio. Another says, if you're playing GPPs and refuse to play volatile, talented players, get help. You're sick, get help. Look, all of these comments are not without merit. But the point is simply what you're saying, what you're stating is you do have to adjust. And you can't continue to project them exactly where you were if coverage has changed on them and it's affecting their week-to-week production. That's all.
Yeah, no, 100%. And again, just reading up a bunch on trying to catch up on YouTube chat. It's the whole cornerback discussion too, right? Like, how good are these cornerbacks against X, or how good is this against this position? Well, what if I told you I can put 2 grade F cornerbacks, but both of them on Julio? Now what? Right? Like, it's not always going to be man to man the entire game, and Julio's going to see the same person so like. A lot of stuff is misleading too if you just want to look at it that way, but it's just know that there's variance. Obviously, Julio's going to have great games. There's days where Julio's going to have bad games, and vice versa for DeAndre Hopkins. It's just, hopefully we land on them when they do have those big games, and just not keep under, or at least lowering their projection every week. Eventually, they're going to get to like 10 fantasy points as my projection, and that's obviously not right. So I agree. Don't fade altogether. You're playing these guys, and if they go down in ownership, I guess that helps a little bit.
All right, you can check Manny out at twitch.tv/mlaura. He'll be on after this. Let's put a bow on it. And we appreciate all you guys hanging out. Of course, the Monday night showdown will be on today around 7:30. So we would definitely encourage you to check that out. I saw a lot of comments in chat, people saying, this is what a terrible showdown slate. I haven't looked at it yet, but you know what? Everyone has access to the exact same players and the exact same salary cap. So if you trust what you're doing, it doesn't matter if it's a good or bad slate. There should be something there for you as well. But yeah, so today you've got NHL is back, by the way. So we'll have that happening. Jake is going to be with you at 4 p.m. Eastern time. And then NFL Live Before Lock, it's with Nolan and EMAC, and that's at 7:30. Also, behind the paywall, Live Before Lock for NBA preseason. Fast Eddie Fear getting it done over at awesomemode.com. And Adam, Ship My Money Share, is actually throwing out a free article. I don't know if he's doing it today, but you can look with a few of his favorite plays for tonight and most of these preseason and NBA slates. We've got a lot at awesomemode.com, and we'd love to have you come check us out. awesomemode.com/join is where you can check out all of our packages and get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus subscription, all access membership. That's ownership projections, player projections, the top stack tools, some awesome NBA tools that we're developing right now will be ready by the start of the season. Of course, the Fantasy Cruncher add-on, that's what Manny does. And the lineup builder, there's so much more. And all of our premium articles, come check it out, awesemo.com/join. And when you do, use the sign-up code NFL Strategy, all one word, NFL Strategy. Get 50% off your first month of Awesemo Plus All Access subscription. We also have memberships for $3.95 a week if you want to dip your feet in and not jump in head first. It's been fun, Manny. What are your final thoughts here? Wrap up this Week 5 slate for us, and we'll move on to Week 6 tomorrow.
Yeah, week 5 was full with a bunch of heavy hitters, some home runs at every position. If you managed to get the perfect combination, congratulations to you. If you lost even the slightest bit, don't feel down on yourself. It just means you didn't piece it all together perfectly like some of the others did. But if you got up closer to the 200s and past that, you had a great week, in my opinion. It's all about process, not about results. Take it for what it's worth, and we'll try to do the same thing again next week.
All right, that'll do it for us. Don't forget to smash that like button. I hate when people say that, man. Oh, I hate it. Smash that like button. No, but seriously, if you could kindly and delicately click it, we'd appreciate that. All right, that'll do it for us. Manny, Laura, myself, Dave Lockram. We'll see you back here next Monday, but the NFL Strategy Show runs Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Sal Vetri and I will give a first look at salaries and break down everything, snaps, routes, targets, carries from Week 5, and get you started with your Week 6 research. We'll see you back here soon on the NFL Strategy Show presented by Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports.